First Enoch, chapter 6. Chapter 6 of First Enoch is fascinating story. And one of the reasons for that is that chapter 6 and 7 of Enoch tracks very closely with chapter 6 of Genesis, which starts off talking about man multiplying on the face of the earth and the mysterious sons of God and the daughters of men passage. The sons of God went in to the daughters of men and who bore children by them. This is very like, what's going on here? Part of the reason for the puzzlement on many people's faces is that these verses are regarded as having some controversy in interpretation and some difficulty if you're a preacher or a teacher. I myself have not preached in churches on Genesis chapter 6. I was more of a New Testament guy until I got really interested in the books of Enoch and other literature like it and started focusing more in Genesis. But if you talk to preachers often don't like to get into things where there's doctrinal controversy, interpretive controversy, and where there's questions that'll come out, which will get into areas where the preacher or teacher might not have too much expertise, might not have any interest in it, or they feel that in their church or their ministry, they don't want to have stuff being touched on that stirs up too much controversy. Well, Nancy and I have been doing ministry together for years, and we're no strangers to controversy or disagreements with other people. So what I'm going to do is go straight into Genesis and First Enoch, and we're just going to go right through this stuff. We're not going to back off from any of the questions. We're not going to pull back from controversial issues or controversial topics. We're going to go straight through it, and it's going to be fascinating and challenging. So what I'll do is I'll start with Genesis chapter 6, and we'll read the first 4 verses. And then I'll make a few comments. So here we are, Genesis 6, 1 through 4 in the ESV. When man began to multiply on the face of the land and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive. They took as their wives any they chose. The Lord said, "My spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh. His days shall be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterward. When the sons of men came in, the sons of God came in to the daughters of man, and they bore children to them. These were the mighty men of old, the men of renown." Now, I've read this section many times. I've never really stopped to take much note of it. I've never studied it in any depth until I started reading and studying the book of Enoch and other literature from that same time period, roughly 200 or 300 BC to 100 AD. There's other materials that have influenced the early church, early Judaism, Book of Jubilees, for instance, the Book of Giants. There's a number of them. But Enoch is, like I said earlier, the one that is most significant, most influential on the writers of the Bible, which is why we're here. So Genesis 6, 1 through 4, we've got men are multiplying. The population is starting to build pretty substantially. And there's sons and daughters, men and women. You know, it's just like Jesus says in Matthew, you know, it'll be like the days of Noah. They're marrying, they're giving in marriage, they're buying and selling, just living life. Then Genesis 6:2, the sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive, and they took as their wives any they chose. Now, this is an interpretive controversy. I'm not going to spend any time really dealing with controversial issues as far as saying, well, here's what it says about this, here's what it says about that. I don't want to make long videos. So if you want to have any additional stuff on that, You can put comments on the video, and we can take some of those up in future videos. So the sons of God, I'm going to give you the overwhelming consensus in the days of what they call the intertestamental period, the Second Temple period, roughly 200 BC to 100 AD. I'll tell you the consensus, largely based on what Enoch tells us, was that these are powerful angels coming down from heaven and going after beautiful women and having sex with them and producing children, known as the Nephilim. This is all very weird and bizarre to many people, but like I said, the book of Enoch was widely read, highly respected, and highly influential. And we'll see more of this as we go on. So now I'll get into 1 Enoch chapter 6, verses 1 and 2. In those days, when the children of man had multiplied, it happened that there were born unto them beautiful and comely daughters. And the watchers, the sons of heaven, saw them and desired them. And they said to one another, Come, let us choose wives for ourselves from among the daughters of man, and beget for ourselves children. This is the interpretation of Genesis 6, 1 through 4, that was overwhelmingly held in the intertestamental period in the early church. And this was the opinion and the outlook that the early church writers and teachers had. It was the generally accepted way that it was, until you had maybe into the 4th, 5th century, when leaders like Jerome and Augustine and others started pushing back very forcefully against this outlook for different reasons, which we may go into later. But First Enoch, you've got multiplying population on the earth, and there were very beautiful women. Well, there's beautiful women all the time. The watchers, the sons of heaven, saw them and desired them. Now, the watchers, this is a very unusual term. It's a technical term. If you go to the book of Daniel in chapter 10, verses 13, 17, and 23, you'll see that the watchers are very special angels that are delegated by God to carry out specific and important duties. In Daniel 10, they deliver judgments, they deliver information. They're clearly not just your normal run-of-the-mill angels. These are what you might call senior or special angels that are reserved for special duties and responsibilities by the Lord of hosts, the Lord of many angels, the Lord of the heavenly realms that are filled with supernatural beings we often call angels. So the watchers are this is not in anybody's commentary, but I would call them senior, specially equipped angels. Within that group of watchers, you had a group that was starting to get interested in the women that were on the earth. It seems as though the watchers had a special job, if you will, to keep an eye on things. One of the things about the name watchers is they stay awake, they watch, they keep an eye on things. In other parts of First Enoch and other literature of this period, the watchers and angels like this are almost like they're the chief operations officers of various parts of life on earth. God had delegated some of the angels to keep an eye on what's going on the earth. And so they had their job and they saw to it. This group here said, look over there, look down there. And they decided that they wanted to take care of looking into this and seeing what was there for them. And they said they desired them, and they said to one another, Come, let us choose wives for ourselves from among the daughters of man, from among the human women, and we will have children just like the men and the women on earth. Here you have angels. Now, one of the controversial things is, well, Jesus said in heaven they're neither married nor given in marriage. So none of this is possible. Well, that's a fallacy. The reason it's a fallacy is that Jesus was speaking in the context of the resurrection. You remember, whose wife will she be if she was married 7 times, and then in the world to come, whose wife is she going to be? Because they all had her, seven men. It's like, you guys don't get it, do you? The story about angels in heaven neither marrying nor being given in marriage, this refers to, okay, the way God sets things up in heaven, you don't have the angels behaving like men and women, male and female, having children, having families. That's not what goes on in heaven. Now, what we see in Enoch is possible. And we know it's possible because Enoch tells us so. And so there are many fallacies that go along with this. But this was the view that was held by the early church. The Jewish community around the 1st century, around the turn of the millennium, call it the 1st century AD, this was the consensus. Everybody understood this. You didn't have to say, oh, well, you remember what Enoch said? Do you guys buy into this? It's not to say that it was the unanimous consensus, but it was the consensus view in those days. And so to wrap up here for today, I'm trying to keep these videos relatively short. Genesis 6 and 1st Enoch 6 and 7 cover a lot of the same ground. We're going to be going through 1st Enoch 6 and 7, verse by verse, passage by passage. We're going to exegete this. We're going to be true with the text. We're not going to duck and dodge stuff and say, well, we don't know about this and I don't want to get into that. We're going to get into it. So Genesis 6 and Enoch 6 and 7 cover a lot of the same ground. Enoch expands on it. Enoch gives you some background about what's happening. And what you've got is the watchers, who are special high-level angels. It's not to say that they're up at the level of cherubim and seraphim, but they were senior angels that had very special responsibilities. But there was this group, we'll get into it next time or soon, how big a group this was. It actually was 20 angels that came up with this plan, and they said, we're gonna make a plan. We're gonna go down there and we're gonna get some of those women for ourselves, and we're gonna have children, and we're gonna get into this new adventure. This is very provocative. It's very unusual, and unless you have read a lot of study notes or a lot of articles or books on this topic, this is very new and very wow, this is wild. Yes, it is. But the reason that we're studying 1st Enoch is not to just get into titillating, wild material for its own sake. But as we go through the book of 1st Enoch, we're going to start to see what aspects of Enoch's outlook on the angelic and the demonic, on the afterlife, on the Son of Man, and other issues that are taken up in Enoch, how they have affected the world of the New Testament writers, the New Testament itself, and what we, Nancy and I, and many other people, are saying, wow, this totally changes my outlook on stuff. It's not to say that we are adopting strange beliefs or weird doctrines. We're not. What I would say is that this reading and study of Enoch and related literature is starting to give us a bigger picture of what's going on in the spirit, the nature of the angelic, the demonic, and practical applications that can affect our prayer life, spiritual warfare, deliverance, and a lot of other stuff too. We're going to be getting into this, and it's going to be fascinating. So until next time, God bless you and hope to see you soon.